What would you do if you saw a stranger sitting alone under a street lamp? No name, no story, just a tired face in the dark. Most people would walk by, but not him. And what started as a simple act of kindness would lead to something neither of them could have ever imagined. This is not just a love story, it's a story about timing, grace, and the quiet power of being seen. If you enjoy heartfelt stories about hope, connection, and the kind of love that grows in the most unexpected places, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the stories we tell here. Now let's begin. He thought she was just a homeless woman, but the next morning a convoy of SUVs took her home. The sun dipped low over Willow Creek, turning the sky into molten copper as it spilled its final light across the cracked sidewalks. This small Appalachian town breathed a kind of weary warmth in the evening, the sort that carried the scent of gasoline, old bricks, and fresh biscuits from the corner diner. The rhythm of life here was unhurried most days. The loudest noise came from the clatter of wrenches in Liam Cole's auto shop. Liam locked the garage with one solid turn of the key, wiping his grease-stained hands on a rag that had seen better days. It had been a long day. 2 oil changes, a radiator job, and a stubborn old Dodge that refused to listen to reason. He stretched his back, felt the familiar pop between his shoulder blades, and turned toward home, ready to collapse onto his thrift store couch. That's when he saw her. Curled at the base of the old iron lamppost at the end of Main Street was a young woman, barefoot clothes, dusty hair pulled back into a loose knot that seemed one wind gust from falling apart. She sat upright, legs tucked beneath her, not asleep but not entirely present either. Her arms wrapped around a canvas satchel that looked like it had been through more than its fair share of roads. Liam hesitated. Strangers were rare in Willow Creek, especially ones who looked like they had nowhere to go. Most folks around here would cross the street. Not out of cruelty, just caution. He didn't cross the street. Evening, he said, his voice even, but gentle. The woman looked up. Her eyes met his, clear, dark, and unexpectedly alert. Evening, she replied, calm but guarded. You all right? He asked. She nodded, just resting. He shifted on his feet, uncertain. You from around here? No, a beat. Just passing through. Liam glanced around. No car, no phone, no backpack, just that bag. Her sandals looked 2 towns past worn out. You eaten anything tonight? She hesitated. No. He reached into the front pocket of his work jacket and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in butcher paper, turkey, and cheddar from the diner. It had been meant for his dinner. He knelt and held it out. It's yours. The woman blinked, her expression unreadable. Why? He shrugged. You look like you could use a meal more than I could. Still wary. She took it, unwrapped it slowly. Ate with deliberate, careful bites like someone who had learned not to expect seconds. He sat down on the curb, a respectful few feet away. I'm Liam. She paused mid-bite. Clara, nice to meet you. Clara. She gave a tiny nod, chewing in silence. The street fell quiet. In the distance, the wind rustled the trees lining the courthouse steps. A neon sign buzzed over the diner. Liam felt the kind of stillness that didn't come often, the kind you didn't want to break with small talk. After a while, he asked, Got somewhere to sleep tonight? She glanced down, then away. I'll manage. He took a breath. I've got a cot in the back of my shop. It's not the Ritz, but it's warm and safe. You'd have privacy, lock on the door. No pressure, just, if you need somewhere. She looked at him for a long moment, studied his face like she was looking for an angle. But there was none. Only the quiet, steady patience of someone who knew what it was like to have nowhere to be. Finally, she stood, picked up her bag. Okay, she said softly. Just for the night. Liam unlocked the side entrance of the garage and flipped on the light. The shop felt different at night, hushed still like an old friend at rest. He led her through the rows of tools and grease-slick floors to a small back room that doubled as his office, and when needed, a place to crash during late repairs. The cot sat in the corner, neatly made. There was a folded blanket, a spare pillow, and a floor lamp, casting a soft glow across the old linoleum. You can lock the door from the inside, Liam said. No one will bother you. Clara stepped inside. Her fingers brushed the edge of the desk, then the back of a wooden chair. She looked around as though it might all vanish if she blinked. Thank you, she said, her voice low. He nodded. I'll be out front if you need anything. As he turned, she asked, Why did you stop? He turned back. Because you look like you needed someone to. She said nothing more and he didn't press her. Later that night, Liam sat outside the shop, a steaming mug of coffee between his hands. The sky above was clear stars scattered like breadcrumbs across velvet. But his mind wasn't on the stars. It was on the girl in the back room. Something about Clara didn't add up. She didn't carry herself like someone used to sleeping rough. Her speech was too refined, her presence too composed. But he didn't need her story tonight. What mattered was she was safe-fed and not alone. He took a slow sip. Wondered if she'd be gone in the morning. Probably, but part of him hoped she wouldn't. Liam rose early the next morning, the same way he had for years. Dawn had barely stretched its fingers across the horizon, but he was already halfway through brewing a pot of strong black coffee in the tiny kitchenette at the back of his garage. Habit more than need moved him, but today wasn't just another day. He glanced down the short hallway toward the back room, toward the girl Clara. The memory of her sleeping form curled quietly beneath the old wool blanket lingered in his mind like morning fog. For a brief second, he wondered if she'd already gone. He walked quietly to the door and knocked gently. "Clara," he said softly enough not to startle her. No answer. Carefully, he turned the knob and peeked in. She was still there. Clara lay on her side, arms folded beneath her cheek, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm. The early light touched the edges of her hair, giving it a faint bronze hue. The tension she'd carried last night seemed to have faded in sleep, if only slightly. He closed the door and let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. By the time the bell above the garage door jingled at 8 a.m., Liam had already changed the oil in an old Ford and restacked a set of tires. Mr. Bledsoe, a retired electrician, strolled in as usual for his Tuesday tire pressure check, talking about the rising price of bacon and his grandson's piano recital. Liam nodded in all the right places, but part of him kept listening for the creak of the back door. At 10:06 a.m. it came. Clara stepped quietly into the garage, blinking against the sunlight pouring through the open bay doors. She looked more awake, her hair tied back into something closer to intentional. Her canvas bag was slung over her shoulder, though it seemed she hadn't packed it up to leave morning. Liam said, keeping his tone light. Morning, she echoed, her voice clearer than the night before. He gestured to the counter beside the coffee pot. "Fresh brewed cream and sugar, if you want it." She hesitated only a second before pouring herself a mug. She sipped, grimaced, then added 2 spoonfuls of sugar. "You don't strike me as a sugar guy," she said, settling onto the step just outside the bay. Liam chuckled and sat beside her. "Not since high school football." They sipped in silence for a moment, the distant murmur of birds and the occasional car passing by. The only soundtrack. Clara glanced down the street. "It's quiet here, it is," Liam said. "Not much happens, but that's sort of the appeal." She nodded slowly. "Feels like a different planet." He looked at her, noting the way her eyes kept moving, always watching, always aware. Not jumpy, just trained, like someone used to being in rooms where silence could mean danger. "You got plans for today?" he asked gently. "Not really," she replied, then added with a small smile. "Unless you need help cleaning out that corner I tripped over last night." He smiled. "You're hired. I pay in leftover donuts and sarcastic company." By noon, Clara had reorganized half the tool cabinet. Liam worked beside her, occasionally pointing out which drawer belonged to which socket set. But she was fast efficient. He noticed her hands steady, confident. This wasn't the first time she'd handled tools, worked in a shop before he asked. "My grandfather had one," she said, tightening the lid on a jar of bolts. "He used to say a wrench was just a lever for solving problems." "Smart man," she smiled faintly. He was. That smile didn't linger long. It faded the way memories sometimes did too, tender to hold on to for too long. They broke for lunch. Chinese takeout from a place Liam swore by. Clara surprised him by knowing the menu by heart. "You've been here before?" he asked. She shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I travel light, but I don't travel blind." Later that afternoon, they sat outside again. The sun warm on their shoulders. Clara picked at the edge of her paper cup. "Thank you for not asking too many questions." Liam looked at her. "You'll tell me when you're ready or not." "That's up to you," she nodded. "It's rare. Most people either demand to know or pretend they don't care, but still judge you anyway." "I'm not most people," I noticed. A moment passed. She looked out across the parking lot, her voice low. I used to be someone that others listened to, someone who was expected to be composed. A symbol even. But somewhere along the way I started losing track of who that girl was. And now she repeated, exhaling. I'm trying to remember who I am when no one is looking. Liam let the silence stretch again, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. You're welcome to stay another night, he said softly. You're not in the way. She smiled, small but real. You might regret that offer. I don't regret much. Not anymore. And for the first time, Clara laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Liam think that maybe this quiet town, this dusty garage, and this woman with storm-colored eyes were all part of a story still being written. The rain began just after midnight, gentle at first like a whisper against the tin roof, then steady, rhythmic, washing away the dust of the day. Inside the garage, the light from the single desk lamp flickered as if unsure of its place in the quiet hush that had settled over everything. Liam lay on the old pull-out cot in his office, fully clothed, one arm folded behind his head, staring at the ceiling. Sleep had eluded him for the better part of an hour. He wasn't sure why he'd had longer days and heavier worries, but something about having Clara there, just down the hall, left him restless, not uneasy, just aware. He kept thinking about the way she'd laughed earlier. It had been brief, almost shy, like something unused to being let out. It had lingered in the air long after she'd gone back to the room. He was reaching for his coffee mug, cold now, but familiar when he heard it. A sound, soft, muffled crying. It was barely audible beneath the rain, but distinct enough to make his breath catch. He rose quietly, walked down the hallway with measured steps, and paused at the closed door. He didn't knock, didn't call her name. He just stood there listening. Clara was crying, not sobbing, not the loud gasping kind. It was quiet, like someone trying not to cry, but losing the battle one tear at a time. He leaned against the wall, uncertain. What was the right thing to do? Knock, walk away, pretend he hadn't heard. Instead, he did what he'd always done. When the world didn't make sense, he reached for music. Back in the office, he flipped through the stack of old CDs in the drawer and chose one without thinking, Chet Baker, Almost Blue. He slid the disc into the stereo, lowered the volume until it was barely above a breath, and let the trumpet do the talking. The mournful melody drifted through the garage, wrapping itself around the silence like a blanket. The rain didn't stop, but it softened. The world for a few minutes felt tender. 20 minutes passed, then a soft knock. He turned to see Clara in the doorway, her arms folded across her chest, her eyes red but clear. I didn't mean to wake you, she said. You didn't, he replied gently. Chet Baker's been keeping me company. She gave a half smile and stepped inside, drawn by the sound my mother used to play this album. On Sunday mornings, she had good taste. Clara glanced around the room, her gaze landing on the cluttered desk, the aging coffee maker, the photo of Liam's parents tacked above the filing cabinet. You really live here? She asked. Sometimes when work runs late, or when I don't feel like going home to four walls and silence? She nodded as if she understood more than she let on. Silence can be loud. He gestured to the second folding chair across from his. Sit. She hesitated, then sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The music carried the weight of the conversation. Finally, she said, Do you ever feel like you disappeared before you even left? Liam looked at her. Yeah, I do. I used to be surrounded by people, she continued. Meetings, interviews, social events. I had assistants who scheduled my life down to the minute, but somehow in all that noise I vanished. He didn't ask for details. The pieces were starting to come together. Not the whole puzzle, but enough to sketch an outline. Clara wasn't just some woman down on her luck. She was someone who had once lived in a very different world, one she'd chosen to leave. Sometimes, Liam said slowly, the loudest place in the world is the one where no one actually hears you. She looked at him, then really looked, and there was something raw in her expression. Recognition. And maybe for the first time in a long while, relief. I didn't want to be rescued, she said quietly. I just wanted to be seen. You were. Clara's eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry again. Instead, she reached over and adjusted the volume on the stereo, letting the music fade into the background. I don't know what comes next, she said. You don't have to, he replied. You're allowed to just be here. They sat like that for over an hour, two people bound not by romance or need, but by the strange grace of shared stillness. No assumptions, no expectations, just breath and presence and healing. Eventually, Clara rose. I should get some sleep, Liam nodded. The cot's yours for as long as you need. She paused at the door. Thank you, Liam. He nodded. Anytime she walked back down the hall, her steps softer now. Steadier. He didn't follow. Didn't need to. He poured himself a fresh cup of coffee even though the hour made it foolish. But as he took the first sip, a strange warmth settled over him. Not from the drink, but from something quieter. From hope. And for the first time in a long while, Liam Cole didn't feel alone. The morning broke bright and cloudless, the kind of day that made Willow Creek look like a postcard town. Dew clung to the grass outside the garage, and the sun slipped through the clouds like honeybirds chirped over the low hum of Liam's air compressor as he checked the brakes on a dusty Silverado. Clara had stayed quiet since their late-night conversation. She'd returned to the cot, and when Liam woke hours later, she was still asleep, peaceful beneath the wool blanket. There was something different about her this morning, something more anchored. She emerged just after 8, holding a steaming mug of coffee and wearing a calmness that hadn't been there the day before. Sleep okay? Liam asked, glancing up from beneath the truck. Better than I have in weeks, she said. Thank you for last night. You needed quiet. I just had a room full of it. She smiled, and for a moment, it was just two people in an old garage sipping coffee and breathing a little easier. But peace, Liam knew, didn't always last. The sound came around 10:15 a.m., a low rumble at first distant, indistinct. Liam thought it was just another semi rolling down the state highway. But then the sound grew louder, sharper, more purposeful. Not one vehicle, but several tires on gravel engines, synchronized like clockwork. He stepped outside. 4 black SUVs were gliding down the narrow lane, polished to a mirror shine. Not local, not by a long shot. They rolled to a stop in front of the garage like a scene from a movie, deliberate, controlled, and out of place in sleepy Willow Creek. The windows were tinted, the license plates were out of state. Liam's instincts from his Marine days stirred uneasily. The driver's door on the lead SUV opened and a woman stepped out. She was in her 50s, tall and elegant, in a tailored gray suit. Her heels crunched lightly on the gravel as she surveyed the area with the cool detachment of someone used to being in command. Her eyes landed on Liam, then drifted past him into the garage. Clara, the woman called, her voice sharp, but not unkind. Liam turned. Clara had frozen behind him, her mug halfway to her lips. Her face drained of color. She didn't look shocked. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment and dreading it all the same. The woman stepped forward. Clara, thank God, we've been looking everywhere. Liam looked between them, confused. You know her. The woman gave him a quick once-over. I'm Meredith Hartley, Clara's godmother and legal counsel to her family. We've been searching for her for nearly a week. Liam blinked. Hartley, as in Hartley Innovations, as in the Hartleys. Clara stepped forward slowly, her voice low. Meredith, I told you I needed space, and you vanished. Meredith said, her tone softening. You left your phone, your ID. Gregory is worried sick. Your father's ready to call in federal resources. Clara flinched at the word father. I didn't mean to cause panic, she said. I just needed one night. Away from everything. Meredith nodded, looking over at Liam again. You've been staying here. Clara glanced at him. Yes, he helped me. That's all. Liam didn't know what to say. His thoughts spun, trying to reconcile the girl who folded rags and cleaned grease pans with the daughter of one of America's most powerful corporate families. He looked at her, truly looked, and it all made sense. The posture, the caution, the precise, deliberate way she moved through the world. Clara hadn't been pretending to be someone else. She'd been shedding the weight of who she was. Give me 5 minutes, she said to Meredith, then turned to Liam. They stepped to the side just beyond earshot. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. I should have told you. You didn't owe me anything. Liam replied. Yes, I did, she said. You gave me safety without questions. That's more than most people ever gave me. He swallowed hard. You going back to that world? She hesitated. I don't know. I have responsibilities, but I don't want to disappear again. Not the way I did before. Liam studied her eyes. The girl beneath the lamppost was still there, fragile, determined, searching. But so was something stronger now. A woman who had faced herself in the dark and chosen not to run. She reached into her bag and pulled out a card. It was simple, just a name, a private phone number, and a gold-embossed logo. "If you ever need anything," she said, "even if it's just a place to sit quietly for a while, call me." He took the card and nodded. "Will you be okay?" She smiled, and for once it didn't carry the weight of apology, I think. "So I found what I came looking for." "And what's that proof?" she said, "that I could still be seen for who I am, not what I'm worth." They stood in the silence for a moment longer. No embrace. No grand farewell. Just two people who'd shared something honest. Clara walked back to the SUV. Meredith opened the door for her without a word. As the convoy rolled away, Liam stood in the dust watching until they disappeared around the bend. He looked down at the card in his hand. Clara Hartley. No title, no company, just a name. And somehow that made all the difference. The garage had never felt so still. Liam stood just inside the open bay door, the morning sun stretching long fingers of light across the concrete floor. Dust floated through the beams like tiny spirits dancing lazily in the silence Clara had left behind. He'd swept the shop twice, organized the tool wall, replaced the broken bulb in the back room, but nothing seemed to fill the space where her presence had quietly taken root. The cot was empty now, the wool blanket folded with care. A half-used bar of soap sat near the utility sink. Her coffee mug remained on the shelf by the fridge, still faintly smelling of vanilla cream. She hadn't taken the mug. Liam ran a hand through his hair and exhaled deeply. He wasn't sure what he expected. Certainly not a farewell parade, not even a handwritten note, but the simplicity of her departure. The quiet closing of a chapter felt like a string being gently pulled from his chest. He reached into the top drawer of his desk and pulled out the card she'd left, thick ivory stock, minimalist. Just her name, Clara Hartley, in elegant serif letters, a single number underneath. No corporate logo, no job title. Just her. He traced the edge of the card with his thumb. She'd given it to him like a life raft, or maybe like a key, but he hadn't called. He wasn't sure he ever would. The days passed slowly, but with a rhythm Liam knew well. Brake jobs, oil changes, tire rotations. Old man Bledsoe still came in every Tuesday morning. Ruthie from the bakery dropped off lemon bars on Thursdays, the way she had since 2016. Everything went on as usual, except it didn't, because Clara's presence had shifted something subtle but undeniable in him. She'd arrived like a question mark, uninvited, unexplained. And in the span of a few nights, she had reminded him of things he'd quietly stopped believing. In grace, vulnerability, second chances. He found himself reaching for jazz in the evenings, something he hadn't done in years. Found himself pausing to watch the sky turn orange at dusk. Found himself wondering sometimes aloud what she was doing at that exact moment. One rainy afternoon about a week after she left, Liam was under the hood of a sputtering Buick when a courier van pulled into the lot. A young guy hopped out and handed him a small package. No return address. Inside was a book, The Places That Scare You by Pema Chodron. Tucked inside the front cover was a yellow post-it note. Thought you might understand this better than most? Thank you for not trying to fix me. See, no phone number, no forwarding address. Just that. He held the book for a long moment. Then he sat on the stool by the workbench and started reading. That night he dug through a dusty box in the attic of the garage, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos his parents at their wedding, his high school football team, a blurry Polaroid of him in uniform standing beside his father's Chevy. And buried beneath it all, a journal. He flipped it open. It hadn't been touched since his return from deployment. The entries were brief, clipped, more like survival reports than reflections. He stared at the blank page at the back. For the first time in a decade, he picked up a pen and wrote, "A woman came to the shop. She didn't ask for help. She didn't want to be saved. She just needed to be seen. I didn't do much, but maybe that was enough." The following Sunday, Liam did something he hadn't done in years. He closed the shop for the day. He drove out of town in his old pickup, taking the winding roads through the hills where the maples were just beginning to turn. It was the kind of drive Clara would have liked, open windows, no destination. the road humming beneath the tires like a low, thoughtful song. At a lookout point above the valley he parked, got out, and stood in the breeze. From here the world looked wide and full of unknowns. Liam pulled her card from his wallet and stared at the number he didn't dial, but he didn't throw it away either. Instead, he folded it into the journal he now carried in the glove box. Not a goodbye, not a beginning, just a placeholder for whatever might come next. Back in town, the sun was beginning to set. He turned onto Main Street just as the lamplights flickered on. The same post where Clara had sat that first night still stood rusted and stoic. He slowed the truck, watched the way the light pooled around the base. For a second he could almost see her there. Legs folded, eyes steady, the whole world sitting silent in her gaze. Liam smiled. Sometimes people leave without warning. Sometimes they leave behind more than they know. It started with a check. An actual check, folded in a plain white envelope, slipped through the mail slot in the garage door on a Tuesday morning just before sunrise. No name, no return address, just for services rendered. Written in neat, almost old-fashioned script, Liam turned the envelope over in his calloused hands. Wary at first, it wasn't uncommon for customers to drop off payment after hours, but this felt different. He opened it slowly, $5,000. He blinked, looked again. $5,000. For what? The handwriting wasn't familiar. The envelope was unmarked. He had no recent invoices that matched anything near that figure. It made no sense. He set it on his desk, staring at it like it might reveal some hidden message if he waited long enough. But there was nothing. No explanation, just the check, pristine and unsettling. For a moment he thought of Clara, the way she'd walked back to that convoy of SUVs without a word of complaint, the way she had looked at him that last morning like she wanted to say something more but couldn't. He slid the check into the drawer beneath her coffee mug and left it there. By Friday, the phone calls began. Not customers, not the usual locals needing their mufflers, patched or brakes replaced. These were different. A man with a sharp New York accent asking if Liam could consult on a specialty engine. A woman with a Colorado area code asking if he offered long-distance restoration for antique trucks. He thought it was a prank until one of them mentioned a referral. "You came highly recommended," she said, "by someone who trusts few but values skill and integrity." "That's enough for me." No name given, just that. Liam hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, heart beating a little too fast. What the hell was going on? 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. This time it bore a letterhead, Hartley Innovations. His pulse quickened as he opened it. Dear Mr. Cole, we've recently expanded a new initiative focused on partnering with independent mechanics for sustainable design research. Your name was submitted with strong personal endorsement. We would like to invite you to tour our R&D facility and discuss possible collaboration. Transportation and accommodations will be provided. Warmly, Melinda Rowe, Chief Strategic Development Officer. No mention of Clara. No details, just an invitation that felt too large for his simple life. Liam read it twice, then folded it carefully and slid it next to the check in his drawer. He didn't call. Not yet. That weekend, Ruthie from the bakery stopped by to drop off her usual box of lemon bars. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him work beneath the hood of a Chevy that had seen better decades. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "I'm always quiet, no," she said, waving a finger. "This is a different kind of quiet, like something's brewing in that big head of yours." Liam chuckled, closing the hood. Just thinking about her. He froze, looked up slowly. She came into the bakery. "You know, the morning after she left your shop, bought a muffin, paid in cash, and thanked me like she was royalty. Didn't say her name, but I remember her eyes, and the way she looked at you when she asked for directions." Liam didn't respond. He didn't have to. Ruthie crossed her arms. "You gonna call her?" He wiped his hands on a rag. "It's complicated. She left something behind," Ruthie said. "Maybe on purpose, maybe not. But that kind of presence, someone who changes the air around you like that, it's worth following up on." She left him the lemon bars and a quiet knowing. That night, Liam sat at his desk long after the garage had gone dark. The check. The letter, Clara's card. It felt like the universe was leaning toward him, waiting to see if he'd lean back. He thought of his father, how he'd worked the same garage until the very end, too proud to ask for help, too scared to believe he could be anything more than what his hands could build. Liam had inherited the hands, but maybe not the fear. He pulled out Clara's card again, ran his fingers along the embossed letters. No fanfare, no pressure, just her name. Simple like the woman herself. He opened the drawer and looked at the letter once more. Then, almost without realizing it, he picked up the phone. His voice when he spoke was steady. "Yes, this is Liam Cole. I'm calling about the invitation." He didn't sleep much that night. The decision sat in his chest like a new engine, foreign but promising. In the quiet, he remembered Clara's words. "I used to be someone people listen to. I want to remember who I am when no one's watching." Now maybe it was his turn not to be watched but to become someone worth listening to. The Hartley Innovations campus didn't look like a place that built machines. It looked like a place that invented futures. Nestled on 50 acres outside Charlotte, the buildings were all glass, steel, and serenity. Sculpted pines lined the entrance road. The reception hall had a reflecting pool that mirrored the sky. Liam Cole, dressed in his cleanest jeans and a freshly pressed shirt, felt like a misplaced wrench in a showroom. He parked his truck in the visitor lot where sleek electric sedans gleamed like digital wolves and stared for a long moment before stepping out. The valet eyed him curiously but took his keys without comment. Inside, the lobby was silent save for the trickle of a stone fountain and the rhythmic ticking of an analog clock. The receptionist, a young man with sharp glasses and an earpiece, smiled politely. "Mr. Cole, right this way. Ms. Rowe will meet you in the glass room." He followed. The building's halls curved and gleamed. Offices behind translucent partitions whispered of power and innovation. Whiteboards scribbled with chemical formulas. Engineers in casual suits debating algorithms. Liam walked past them like a ghost from another world. The glass room was just as it sounded, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake, minimalist decor, soft lighting. A woman in her 40s rose to greet him. "Mr. Cole, it's a pleasure." She extended her hand. Melinda Rowe. Her handshake was firm, her smile practiced. She gestured for him to sit. "We're grateful you accepted the invitation." Liam nodded, scanning the room for anything familiar. "I wasn't sure I belonged here." Melinda tilted her head. "Someone very persuasive assured us that you do." He said nothing, but his hand drifted unconsciously toward the pocket where Clara's card still lived. Melinda tapped a digital tablet and brought up a design schematic on the wall screen. It was a prototype, compact, efficient, clearly a next-generation engine. "We're exploring a line of utility-focused electric vehicles for rural and industrial use. We've found that most engineers don't understand what small-town mechanics really deal with. We want someone who does, and you think that's me?" Melinda smiled. "Clara does." Liam looked at her carefully. "She works here. She's one of our principal shareholders and creative leads. Her official title's Director of Applied Vision, but truthfully, Clara defies titles." Liam's mouth felt dry. She hadn't mentioned this. Hadn't hinted. "She told me she left everything," he murmured. "She did," Melinda said. "But she's not the type to abandon responsibility. She just needed to disappear long enough to remember why she started all this in the first place." Liam exhaled slowly. "You're not here because you're a mechanic," Melinda added. "You're here because you treated her like she was no one special." That meant everything. He sat back, unsure what to say. Melinda rose gently, placing a folder in front of him. "It's just a conversation, Mr. Cole. If you're open to it, we'd love to hear your ideas. If not, no hard feelings. We'll still be grateful for the part you played in bringing Clara home." The rest of the day passed in a blur of polite questions, technical discussions, and a tour of the facility. They showed him their fabrication lab, the sustainability center, the test track. At every turn, someone mentioned Clara. Clara proposed that shift. Clara challenged that design. Clara insisted we meet with people who actually get their hands dirty. He saw photos of her on display walls at conferences and factory meetings, kneeling beside a concept engine in work boots and gloves. There was no vanity in her image, only focus, leadership, resolve. It unsettled him, not because she hadn't told him, but because now he understood the weight she had carried in silence. That night in the guest suite, they provided modern, spotless too. Quiet, Liam stood at the window and looked out over the moonlit campus. Somewhere in this place, Clara had forged an empire of ideas, and yet when she needed refuge, she had chosen a garage floor and a sandwich wrapped in butcher paper. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the card again. Clara Hartley. The name no longer felt distant, no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a promise. The next morning, as he prepared to leave, Melinda met him in the front lobby. "She's in Building 4, she said, nodding toward a separate wing workshop level. "You can stop by if you want." Liam hesitated. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." He didn't go to Building 4. Not yet. Instead, he walked out into the sunlight, keys in hand, and got into the only truck in the lot that bore rust along the fenders. As he pulled away, he looked once in the rearview mirror. No towers, no steel, just sky. He wasn't running. He was thinking, and for the first time in a long time, the possibilities ahead of him didn't feel overwhelming. They felt earned. The invitation came a week later, not through a formal letter or courier, but as a simple text message. 7 words long. "Will you be at the unveiling tomorrow?" No signature, no flourish. But Liam knew he didn't need the number saved in his phone to recognize the quiet certainty of Clara's voice in his mind. He stared at the screen for a full minute before typing his reply. "I will." The unveiling took place at the Hartley Innovations Outdoor Pavilion, a sweeping open-air structure with clean glass lines and a panoramic view of the wooded valley below. It was less a building and more a statement. Here the future breathes. Rows of white chairs line the stage, each bearing a minimalist folder embossed with the company's logo. Engineers, investors, journalists, and a handful of military officials filled the space, murmuring about prototypes and supply chains. Liam stood near the back, uncomfortable in the borrowed sport coat and polished boots they'd sent over. He'd left his wrench-stained clothes at the hotel, but not the part of himself that felt more at home beneath a hood than under a spotlight. Still he stayed. When the lights dimmed and the murmurs quieted, a soft piano track rose from hidden speakers. A massive screen blinked to life behind the stage. The company's newest initiative filled the screen in bold white letters, "Hartley Ground, designed for those who build." What followed was a series of short clips: farmers navigating muddy roads in pickup trucks, construction workers hauling gear through tough terrain, mechanics diagnosing faults on the fly, all narrated by a quiet, steady female voice. It wasn't Clara's voice, but it spoke like her, measured, compassionate, unassuming. Then the video cut to black, and for a moment everything held still. Clara stepped onto the stage. She wore no corporate blazer, no designer heels, just black slacks, a tucked-in navy blouse, and her hair pulled loosely away from her face. She looked, Liam realized, not like an executive. She looked like herself. The crowd leaned forward as she took the mic. "I've spent most of my life in rooms like this." She began, "rooms where vision is measured by graphs and people by their titles. But 2 months ago, I met someone who reminded me that real innovation starts in places with no nameplates, no press coverage, and no applause. Just calloused hands, honest work, and the courage to care quietly." Liam felt the breath catch in his chest. Clara continued, her gaze sweeping the crowd but never quite landing on him. "He didn't know who I was. He didn't ask. He just gave me a sandwich and a place to rest. That small act taught me more about human-centered design than any boardroom ever has." She paused, letting the words settle. "Hartley Ground is our attempt to honor that simplicity, to meet people where they are, to build not for headlines but for hands." The applause was quiet at first, genuine, thoughtful, before swelling into something larger. Clara stepped back from the mic, nodded once, and walked off stage. Liam didn't wait for the reception. He left before the reporters began swarming and before the next presenter even took the stage. He wandered the back paths of the campus until he reached a quiet overlook, a bench facing the lake, the same glassy waters he'd seen on his first visit. She was already there. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes on the horizon, like she'd known he'd come. He didn't say anything at first, just sat. It was several minutes before she spoke. "You didn't have to come, I know," he said. "But you did." He nodded. "I wanted to hear what you had to say." She turned toward him, her eyes soft. "I wasn't sure you'd still want to." "I wasn't sure either," he admitted. "But then I remembered something." "What's that?" "That night in the garage when you said you used to be someone. People listened to. I didn't know then what you meant, but now I do. Clara looked away, her fingers tightening around each other. You're not that girl under the street lamp anymore, he said, but she's still part of you, and I liked her. I like you. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. I was terrified to see you again. Not because of who you are, but because of who I've had to be out here. All the masks I thought I'd burned. They're still hanging in every hallway. You didn't wear a mask with me. That's what scared me most, she said, her voice almost breaking. You saw me without one, and I still don't know if I deserve that. Liam turned toward her. We're not made to be perfect, Clara. We're made to be honest. That's what you were. She smiled, then a small, broken, beautiful thing. I've missed talking like this, she whispered. So have I. They sat in silence again. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that fills in spaces that used to ache. Finally, Clara reached into her coat and pulled out something familiar. His coffee mug. She held it out. You left this in the back office. Thought you might want it back. Liam took it, gently chuckling. Didn't think you were the sentimental type. I'm not, she said, but I'm learning. As the sun dipped below the trees, casting golden light over the lake, Liam turned toward her. Clara, he said quietly, what happens next? She didn't answer right away, but then she reached for his hand, slowly, deliberately, and laced her fingers through his. Maybe, she said, we find out together. They met the next morning in the workshop. Not a boardroom, not a presentation hall, but among the smell of sawdust oil and the low hum of machinery, Clara insisted on it. She said it was the only place that ever made her feel like she belonged. Liam showed up in jeans and a faded denim shirt, sleeves rolled, hands already streaked with graphite from fiddling with an old carburetor he'd found on her workbench. She smiled when she saw him holding 2 coffees, one black, one with cream. He took the black without asking. You remembered some things you don't forget, she said, handing it over. They stood in the quiet clink of tools and background noise. Clara gestured toward a new design schematic laid out across the drafting table. It was a modular engine system, simple, efficient, rugged. Something that looked like it belonged under the hood of a farm truck more than a showroom vehicle. It's brilliant, Liam said, running his hand along the edge of the blueprint. Who came up with it? You did. He looked at her. That night, she said, when you explained how you modified the dual manifold system on the Dodge without high-performance parts. That's where it started. This, she tapped the blueprint, is just that idea scaled and translated. Liam stared at the page, stunned. You remembered that I didn't forget a word of it. He let out a breath, feeling something unnameable rising in his chest. She folded her arms, suddenly more reserved. I want you on the team, Liam. Not as a guest, not as a consultant from afar. I want to build this with you, together. He raised a brow. You're serious? I've never been more. He studied her face. There was no pitch in her voice, no performance. Just truth. Still, he hesitated. I'm a small-town mechanic, Clara. I don't have a degree. I've never drawn a patent or worn a headset to a meeting. You've fixed more broken systems with half the tools than some engineers with a lab full of funding, she said firmly. And more importantly, you see people. You design with your hands, but you build with your heart. That's what this place needs. He rubbed his jaw, still trying to absorb it all. What would I even be? He asked. Clara smiled. Partner. His breath caught partner. In development, in problem solving, in asking better questions. Maybe, she added gently, in something else too. That last part hung in the air like an unspoken melody. Liam looked around the workshop, the sunlight catching on a stack of wrenches, the scuff marks on the cement where people moved with purpose. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't corporate, it felt honest. I don't know how to play politics, he said at last. Good, she replied. I'm tired of people who do. He chuckled. You really want to work with me? Clara stepped closer, her voice soft. I want to build something that matters with someone who understands what matters. Not just numbers, not just margins. Someone who knows how it feels to rebuild after everything's fallen apart. His throat tightened. Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn bolt, a tiny rusted thing. She placed it in his palm. I found this in your garage the night I left. I kept it. It reminded me that strength doesn't always shine. Sometimes it just holds everything together. Liam closed his fingers around the bolt, It was warm from her hand. "You didn't call for a long time," she said quietly. "I didn't know if I belonged, and now I still don't," he admitted. "But maybe that's the point." She smiled. They spent the afternoon reviewing sketches, sharing notes, and laughing over misaligned blueprints. At one point, Clara reached for a pencil at the same time he did, and their hands met. She didn't pull away, neither did he. When dusk began to settle, she walked him to the front steps of the building. The sun was melting into the horizon, leaving the sky blushed and golden. "Liam," she said, turning toward him, "this doesn't have to be about work. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to stop there." He studied her face the way the light caught in her eyes. "I never asked you for anything," she said, "not even your name that first night. But now I'm asking." "For what?" "For a chance," she whispered, "to build something real." Liam stepped forward, his voice quiet. "Then let's build slow," he said. "Let's build it right." She nodded, and for the first time their story wasn't about rescue or refuge or survival. It was about creation. The first argument came over a bolt. More specifically, over the placement of a tension bolt in the prototype's front suspension housing. Liam insisted on an angled bracket to allow for field adjustments. Clara preferred the sleeker fixed design cleaner, more elegant but harder to modify without specialized tools. They stood over the workbench blueprint between them, tension rising with each sentence. "It needs to be adaptable," Liam said, voice level but firm. "Out there, things break. People don't always have the luxury of precision tools or climate-controlled garages. And if it's over-engineered," Clara shot back, "you lose efficiency. Cost goes up. The system becomes harder to scale." "It's not about scale," he countered. "It's about who we're building it for." The guy under a tree with grease on his hands and no time for perfect. She paused, breathing through her frustration. Then, without warning, she stepped back and nodded. "You're right," she said. Liam blinked. "I am. I forgot what this was about," Clara admitted, her voice softer now. "Not the investors, not the launch. The people." Liam exhaled. "We're not designing for the boardroom." She met his gaze. "That's why I need you here." It wasn't the last disagreement. There were more over timelines, materials, whether or not the early engine test should be fielded with minor imperfections or held back for polish. But each clash revealed something deeper. Clara brought vision, systems, scope. Liam brought grounding, function, heart. And somewhere between those tensions, they began to trust not just each other, but the space between them. One morning, Liam arrived to find a sticky note on his desk. "Testing is about discovery, not perfection. C," he smiled and scribbled back, "good because perfection's overrated. L." By week's end, they had developed a rhythm. Clara would call out design notes while Liam adjusted the 3D model. He'd suggest changes mid-prototype, and she'd evaluate them on the fly. They argued, laughed, and on the rare occasion when neither had anything to say, they just worked in silence, comfortable and complete. It wasn't easy, but it was real. On Friday afternoon, Clara invited Liam to her private testing site, an off-grid terrain park nestled on the edge of the company's forest reserve. They drove out in a beat-up prototype pickup, its body unfinished, sensors exposed like bones under skin. Liam handled the steering. Clara held the clipboard, hair blowing wildly from the open window. "You know you're driving like you stole it, right?" she shouted over the engine's growl. He grinned. "Only way to find out what it can take." The truck lurched over a rocky incline, rattling but holding. At the summit, Liam killed the engine. They stepped out into silence, the kind that only existed far from roads and reception. Clara leaned against the hood, her blouse streaked with dust, clipboard abandoned in the cab. "This feels more honest than any presentation I've given," she said, staring at the tree line. "Here it's just metal and willpower." Liam joined her, crossing his arms. "You've built a hell of a lot more than metal, Clara." She looked at him, then eyes searching. "So have you." They didn't kiss, not then. Not under the forest canopy or the golden light filtering through the trees. Instead, they stood side by side, letting the silence stretch into something intimate and unspoken. Something earned. Clara broke it gently. "My whole life I've been told that leading meant controlling, but you." She turned to him. "You lead by listening." Liam smiled. "You lead by letting go." They didn't say anything more. They didn't need to. That evening, they worked late in the garage. Liam adjusted the suspension specs while Clara debugged a software patch. Around midnight, Liam tossed her a bottled water. She caught it one-handed, leaned back in the rolling chair, and sighed. I used to think work was my shield, she said. That if I stayed busy enough, focused enough, I wouldn't feel the empty parts. He glanced at her. And now? Now I think the right work doesn't hide you. It reveals you. Liam nodded slowly, I think. I needed to be seen too. Clara reached across the table and rested her fingers on the edge of his hand. Then let's keep seeing each other. Not just when it's easy. He didn't pull away. I'm in, he said. And they sat there surrounded by wrenches and circuit boards, two people who had every reason to stay guarded, choosing instead to build with trust as their blueprint. The invitation came in a plain envelope, hand-delivered, and bearing no company seal, just a small return address in handwritten, cursive, Hollow Creek Children's Shelter. Clara placed it on Liam's desk with a gentle tap. They asked if we'd be willing to visit, talk to the teens, show them what real-world innovation looks like. Liam looked up from the engine sketch he was modifying. You mean you want me to teach kids how to replace a timing belt? Clara smiled. Maybe, or maybe just let them see that not everyone who creates things starts in a tower of glass and steel. He studied her for a moment. You've been there before? She nodded. My mother used to take me every Christmas. It was her way of reminding me that life outside our gates didn't revolve around shareholders or status APAs. She passed when I was 19. I never went back. Liam softened. Let's go. They arrived the following Saturday driving the prototype pickup. Its body now painted, its interior unfinished. Clara insisted they leave it that way. Let them see the process, she said. Not just the polish. The shelter sat on the edge of a wooded property, a modest one-story building with bright murals covering its aging brick walls. Kids milled about the yard as they pulled in, some laughing, some guarded, all curious. Inside, a wiry woman with silver hair and warm eyes met them at the door. Clara Hartley, she said with a knowing smile. Didn't think I'd see your face again. Clara embraced her. It's good to see you. Louise. Louise turned to Liam. You must be the mechanic who doesn't know he's a teacher yet. Liam smiled, shaking her hand. I'm just here for the spark plugs. She winked. They're in the back, but first you've got an audience. The audience was a dozen kids ages 8 to 17, seated in a makeshift classroom with folding chairs and wide eyes. Clara stood in front. Liam beside her, feeling entirely out of his depth. Clara started simply, This is Liam. He's a mechanic, a designer, and though he'll never admit it, an inventor. Liam cleared his throat. I just fix things that don't want to work. The kids chuckled. Over the next hour, Liam demonstrated how a crankshaft worked using a broken bicycle, a string of washers, and 2 plastic cups. Clara explained how ideas become sketches and sketches become machines. But it wasn't the content that mattered. It was the energy. The kids asked questions. They laughed when Liam couldn't remember the name of a particular valve and called it the angry tube. They listened when Clara told them they didn't need money or degrees to start building, just curiosity. And the guts to fail. At one point, a girl in a red hoodie raised her hand. Did you guys always know what you wanted to be? Clara hesitated. No, she said, I only knew what everyone else wanted me to be. Liam added, and I only figured it out when I stopped trying to prove anything. The room grew quiet, not heavy, just thoughtful. The girl lowered her hand. That makes me feel better. Clara smiled, it should. After the workshop, they helped plant a garden out back. It wasn't part of the plan, just something that started with a shovel and grew into a group project. Liam knelt beside 2 boys, teaching them how to turn the soil. Clara worked with a girl who'd never held a trowel but took to it like she'd been born with dirt in her hands. As the sun began to dip, Louise called out, Supper's on. The kids ran off, but one little girl, no more than 6, with pigtails and oversized boots, lingered near Clara. She tugged at her sleeve. Are you married to the man who fixed the bike? Clara blinked. No, sweetie. He's just a friend. The girl tilted her head. But you looked at him like my aunt looks at Uncle Pete. And she loves him? Lots, Clara laughed, startled. Do I? The girl nodded solemnly. You should tell him grown-ups are bad at saying nice things out loud. Then she skipped off toward the dining hall, leaving Clara frozen in place. Later, as twilight wrapped the trees in purple shadows, Clara and Liam sat on the tailgate of the truck, sipping lemonade from paper cups. "That little girl thinks we're married," Clara said suddenly. Liam snorted. "Well, I guess this makes us an old married couple who bicker over bolt placement. She also said we should tell each other how we feel." Liam turned to look at her. Clara's voice was quieter now. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. Like the world could be enough. Like someone could see all my broken pieces and not try to fix them. Just be near them." Liam didn't respond right away. He looked out at the yard where the kids laughed in the dusk. Light chasing fireflies and carrying plates of mac and cheese. "You make the world quieter," he said finally. "Not because you disappear, but because you let it breathe." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft golden glow of the string lights overhead. "And you make me feel real," she whispered. He reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. That night, as they drove back under a sky full of stars, neither spoke much. Words weren't needed. Between the hum of the tires and the warmth of her hand in his, everything was said already. In the quiet between them, something new had taken root. And this time, it wasn't business. It was something far more difficult. Far more lasting love. Autumn had settled over Willow Creek like a soft blanket. Warm golds, crisp reds, the scent of wood smoke and apples in the air. The town moved a little slower now. Kids kicked up piles of leaves after school, and the days tilted gently toward early dusk. Liam stood outside his garage, arms crossed, sipping coffee from the old ceramic mug Clara had once returned to him. The same one she'd sipped from that second morning when her guard was still up and her past still hidden behind tired eyes. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months since a girl beneath a street lamp changed the shape of his quiet life. And tonight she was coming back. Not for a visit, not for a meeting. For good. He'd spent the morning cleaning the back room, not because she asked, but because he wanted her to see how much had changed and how much hadn't. The cot had been replaced with a proper bed. A small bookshelf stood in the corner, stocked with the titles she'd once said she loved. On the windowsill, a pot of lavender, her favorite, soaked in the afternoon light. He'd even fixed the porch light that had flickered since spring. She always noticed small things like that. At 5:14 p.m., he heard the crunch of tires on gravel, the familiar sound of the prototype pickup hers now pulling up outside the shop. He stepped out just as she opened the door. She was wearing jeans boots and a navy flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and her smile when she saw him was the kind that makes a man forget how to breathe. "You're late," he teased, folding his arms. She walked up to him and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "You're lucky I came at all. I had to pass up 2 offers, 3 emails, and 1 stubborn board member just to get here." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Still worth it." Clara looked around at the garage, the street, the faded lamppost at the corner. "It always was," she said. That evening, they didn't go to a restaurant. They didn't host a launch party or pop champagne. Instead, they walked just like that first night. The air was crisp, leaves skittering across the pavement. Liam carried a paper bag with 2 turkey sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. Clara tucked her arm into his, their footsteps unhurried, their silence full. They reached the old lamppost just as the sun dipped below the hill. The light buzzed on with a soft hum, casting a familiar glow over the sidewalk. Clara stopped, looked down at the base of the post, where she'd once sat with a bag and no plan. "I was so lost that night," she whispered. "I wasn't running from anyone. I was running from myself. And you stopped here." Liam said she turned to him because you didn't look away. He took her hand and lowered himself to sit beside her, right on the sidewalk. She laughed and joined him, knees tucked close, just like before. He opened the bag and handed her a sandwich. She took it, grinning. "You really are a creature of habit." Only when the habit's worth keeping, they ate in silence for a moment, watching the town settle into twilight. Lights flickered on in distant windows. A dog barked down the street. Somewhere a train rumbled softly through the hills. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said, "we could start something right here." He raised a brow. "Start what, a tradition? Every year we come back to this spot, same sandwiches, same lamppost. Just to remind ourselves where it all started." Liam smiled. "And if it's raining, then we sit here wet and grateful." He laughed and kissed the top of her head. Deal. The next morning, they opened the garage together. Not as business partners, not as CEO and consultant, but as two people who had chosen to build a life out of something no company could manufacture: trust, compassion, and a second chance. Customers came and went. Kids from the shelter stopped by to see the prototype again. Ruthie from the bakery brought cinnamon rolls for the newlyweds, even though they weren't not yet, but soon maybe. Clara set up a small design studio in the back office, sketching ideas while Liam worked the lifts. They shared tools, stories, and occasionally silent frustrations, because they were human and because they were honest. But at the end of every day, they sat together on the front step, no matter how long the hours, no matter how tired their bones, together. One evening, as golden light spilled over the mountains, Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. Simple silver, no diamond, just a band with a single engraving inside. Scene chosen home. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. Clara looked at him, eyes wide, heart open. Yes, she said, before he even asked. And just like that, the girl beneath the street lamp became the woman who would never have to run again. And the man who once thought he had nothing to offer became the reason someone believed in beginnings again. They didn't promise perfect, they promised presence. And under the quiet glow of that old lamp, they began their forever. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And what part of this story touched your heart the most? If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply made you believe in the quiet power of kindness, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories just like this one. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching and for being part of this community. See you in the next story.